Cool. Hi everyone, welcome back to CafUEL where we speak with UEL Academics. So at the end of the podcast, we want you, aka prospective students, can have deeper insight into the course, what module you'll be studying, or just simply who you'll be working with. And today we welcome a really special get in. He's Adam Powley, Joint Program Leader at BA Sport Journalism. Really nice to meet you, Adam.
Pleasure to meet you.
Before going to the questions that I sent you before, I hope you remember.
I'll try.
Would you mind introducing yourself, but in the way that you normally do?
I was and am a practicing journalist, a practitioner. So I've worked, across the media in various settings for newspapers and magazines and websites and a little bit of broadcast as well. And the reason why I say that is because it's key to how we teach our courses. We are a practitioner-led course. So what students learn and do on the course is what happens in the industry. So that's kind of me, I guess, like a basic introduction.
Okay, cool. With that industry experience and academic experience you have had during a lot of years in UEL, what is your current research topics or research interest that you're working on? I know that you're working on a lot of projects and there's a lot of interesting thing going on, but what is that one research interest that you're working on right now?
Okay, at the moment we're doing original research into diversity in the sports media, and more accurately, the lack of diversity in the sports media. Our particular focus at the moment is on ethnicity and race, and the lack of representation of minority ethnic practitioners and journalists like working in the industry, but also behind the scenes and also in management and executive roles. So that's our initial research, that's our focus on the moment, but then we're going to broaden that out into other areas like things like gender and social class. So really it's an ongoing kind of like project to look at the UK sports media industry and look at how it's made up, how it's changing, how it's not changing, and how perhaps it needs to change.
But why does it need to change?
I think the most important thing for the media is that it has to reflect its audience. It has to hold effectively like a mirror up to its audience. And traditionally, if you take the example of the sports media, it's been dominated by people who look and sound like me. And that audience has changed. The audience isn't just people that look and sound like me. It's diversifying. It has different wants and needs, and it has different interests. So the media industry needs to move with that to be able to engage with fresh audiences, new audiences. It needs readers, watchers and listeners because otherwise it can't sustain itself. And actually we found in our research that speaking to industry executives and people in senior management roles, that they're very open and they're very willing to change. Hopefully the research that we do will help them to enact that change.
Okay, cool. How does it why does it matter to you personally as a practitioner?
Yeah, right. I guess it comes back to that audience element is, if you take a look at, for example, how technology has changed. So the way we consume the media is very different. So when I was growing up and I first got interested in the media, it was very conventional. It was newspapers, the printed word, magazines, TV and radio. And now obviously we have a huge diverse range of platforms, most notably social media, which has been a real transformative kind of engine that's driving the industry at the moment. The issue is that while the audience is, particularly a younger audience and more diverse audience, is familiar with that change and we're familiar with that platform, social media, a lot of people in the industry, particularly the older and staler that we get, we're not so familiar with it. So I think there's inevitably going to be an issue there where the people who are producing the content don't necessarily understand the way that it's consumed. Not just the format, but also the content and the ideas and the kind of stories that it's covering. So I'll give you, just as one example, and this relates to our work that we're doing on diversity. One of the kind of growth subject areas is in itself kind of like diversity within sport. The problems of racism within national sports like football and cricket and things like that. So if the audience is changing, they're getting younger, for example, and more diverse in terms of race and gender, and they've also got a different idea about what the important subject areas are, like things like diversity and racism, then the industry has to respond to that. It has a duty to respond to that. So that's why it's important, I think, to serve the needs of a new audience, but also to serve the needs of the industry, because if it doesn't change, it will grow stale and it will wither. It needs, in other words, to move with the times.
Yeah. I do find it fascinating because I have a lot of friends who come from different backgrounds. I live in East London, so you know how diverse it is when it comes to race, comes to languages, and comes to cultures. And I think as media students, I do find it really relevant, and I think we do need a change. But then with all of these research that you've been doing, with all of these experiences that you have had, how is it affecting the course that you're teaching and the module that you're leading?
That's very important to us. Like, we're not doing our research in isolation. It's absolutely key to how we teach the courses that we also move with the times. So you will see that reflected in again, how we changed the format and the platform and the technology we use. We need to keep up to date with how people tell stories, how they do their journalism, how that alters. So again, the whole kind of like social media thing. If you look at the course now, a lot of our focus is on social media that 5 years ago, it wouldn't have had that. So that hopefully shows that development. So that's on a platform and a kind of technical aspect. In terms of the journalism, we fully integrate that into our learning and development for the students. So we have a number of modules, for example, with sports journalism, where it's not about the action that takes place on the pitch, in the pool, on the track, or on the court. It's about the issues that surround it, because that helps inform our students' understanding of the world that they want to be in the world of sports journalism. So this term, for example, with our level 6s, we've been teaching a module called Reporting the Politics of Sport. And that goes into very detailed background to the contextual relationships that sport has with politics and across a range of subject areas, so like racism, government, policing, society in general, because sport and sports journalism doesn't take place in isolation. It reflects and contributes and mirrors and is an integral part of wider society. So there's an alignment there with our kind of research into diversity in the sports media and how we kind of integrate that into our teaching and present it to our students to give them a better understanding, a more rounded understanding of the industry.
Okay, cool. That's interesting. Talking about the industry, and I heard the word report. I joined one of your classes the other day, and then there is a kind of like an assignment where a student has to collect the news and report it within 24 hours or within 3-4 hours. Do you mind elaborating a bit for the audience to understand what do you want and what do you want the student to achieve?
Okay, so that's a really good example of how our teaching is integrated with how industry works. So we run what are called news days, and this is familiar. Lots of courses around the country on journalism will and should teach this, and it's basically replicating the real world environment of journalism. So our students will come in at the start of the day. They'll have an editorial planning meeting about what they're going to be covering over that day. And then we will set deadlines for them and minimum requirements for the kind of content, the original journalism that they should be producing. So that will be in the format of articles contributed to an online website, but also a radio bulletin or a TV bulletin. So for example, we'll have a 1 p.m. news bulletin of 3 minutes in which we want X number of stories and we want reports on such and such, and the students work individually but also collaboratively to produce that radio bulletin. We place, excuse me, we place a strong emphasis on deadlines. So if we say a news bulletin needs to go out at 1 p.m, it goes out at 1 p.m. Because in the real world, that's how it works. You know, if you tune in to the BBC 6 o'clock news, it starts at 6 o'clock. It doesn't start at 6:10 with the presenter coming on saying, can you just wait a bit while we get our stories done? Deadlines and timing is really, really essential in the world of journalism. So we like to give our students that kind of environment to work in, because that's the kind of world they're going to be going into. Look, they don't always succeed, but the most important thing is that they try and they experiment and they give things a go and they're ambitious. Because at university is the perfect time, the perfect opportunity to have a go, to experiment, to try, to be ambitious. You can make mistakes here that you can't necessarily make in the industry. So in a way, it's kind of a proving ground, a training ground for our students. If you're going to make any errors, do it here at university, learn from it, so you'll be better equipped to work in the real world of journalism.
Yeah, fascinating. It's funny, it's like that. The assignment that you gave in my the first 5 seconds I heard about it, I was like, what? That sounds really stressful. But the moment I follow along the students who actually do it, it's actually very interesting to be in that context where you have to literally run.
Yeah.
For the reports.
Exactly, that's how it should be, and that's why the world of journalism is fun and exciting. It's not a dull 9-to-5 job. It's about the effort and the commitment that you put into it, and the range of experiences that you can have. It is stressful. You know, I've been in that environment of working to very, very tight deadline, and the pressure is on, and you feel the pressure, but the sense of achievement when you actually meet your deadline, and you know, whatever you've been working on, if you know, in the instance of when I was a newspaper reporter, of getting my report in on time, on deadline, and then seeing it appear in the newspaper the next day. The buzz from that is unmatched. It's a real kind of sort of, you know, you talk about job satisfaction. Yeah. There's real huge, immense job satisfaction from being able to cope with that pressure and to be able to produce. And it is stressful, but it's also exciting, and it's never dull. It's never boring.
I can imagine that.
There's a famous story from the 1999 European Cup final, Champions League final, between Manchester United and Barcelona. And for anyone that's not a sports fan, I'll just give you a brief description of how it works. Is that, sorry, not against Barcelona, against Bayern Munich. Got that wrong. I needed to correct that. And Manchester United were losing. It was going into injury time and they were going to lose the final. And then they scored an equaliser. Now, the reporters working there, they have a thing called on the whistle. So basically, it's a system whereby when the final whistle goes in a football match or an event, you press send and you send your report to your newspaper, your website, your publication. So they have to pre-write it and get it ready so that when that final whistle goes, they can send it. So obviously, if something dramatic happens late, they've got to change it. And that necessitated a really rapid, quick rewrite. Okay, so they did that within a couple of minutes, and then what happened? Manchester United scored another goal, which changed the outcome completely. So they had to do it all over again. And you speak to people that were working there at the time, editors that were working in their newsrooms in London and elsewhere, they will say that it was one of the most stressful, pressured, high intensity environments they've ever worked in, but it was also one of the most exciting things they've ever done, because they were able to respond to that and produce really good content. And 20 years on, you'll still hear journalists talking about that night in Barcelona, not just because of the game, but because of their experience in...
It's the emotion that remains.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, what do your students think when they hear about that story?
They're kind of impressed. but in all honesty, they're also a little bit worried and and concerned of thinking, am I going to be in that situation? And you know, we say to them, you know, we're honest with them about that those situations can be high intensity, they can be very pressurised, and you need to be able to cope with that. But the outcome, the actual buzz and excitement, more than compensates for any stress at the time. And usually you find that students are really kind of enthused and engaged by that. If you know, if you don't want to be part of that, if you don't want to have that kind of experience and that kind of intense level of job satisfaction, maybe journalism isn't for you.
Okay, cool. But talking about that, talking about people who are thinking of or considering journalism as an academic choice or career, what is that one piece of advice you would give someone who is considering journalism or considering UEL or considering the course you're teaching at?
Sure. Okay. The most important thing, we say this to students when in open and offer days. We say this to students who are applying, and when we interview them, we say it to students at the start of their first year, start of their second year, start of their third year, and end of their third year, all the way through. Consume media. Read newspapers, read websites, listen to radio bulletins, watch TV news, devour and consume magazines, look at blogs, look at what people are saying, writing and doing within the world of the media. The people that consume the most in terms of journalism are other journalists, because it's a really good way to learn what's going on in the world. It's a really good way to find out what's going on in your specialist area of interest. And it's a really good way to see what everyone else is doing and think, right, what can I do with this story? What can I do with this information? We encourage students to consume as much media as possible, because then what they'll do is almost naturally they'll pick up the ways to write and present and to edit and to focus. So they're approaching it not from the perspective of in inverted commas, an ordinary reader, watcher, viewer, listener, whatever, but as a professional journalist observing how the professionals do it. So that is, you know, one piece of advice, whether you're interested to come and study journalism or you're just interested in it and you want to find out a bit more, read, watch, listen as much journalism as you can do.
I think it's a super great advice, and then I think prospective students who are looking to join either higher education, UEL, or sport journalism in general can actually learn from that a lot. And it's also the end of this podcast here today. And thank you for your time, Adam. We learned a lot about the course and a lot about you and also the world of journalism as well. And if you have any questions, please send straight to ACI admission, or you may meet Adam at some of the open events.
It'd be lovely to see you at an open and an offer event, and we can talk more. Yeah, that's for sure.
Thank you, Adam, for today.
Thank you very much.
Really
Thank you.
lovely to have you on this podcast.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thanks.